Well, thank you very much, and good morning, everyone. So I'm honored to chair a stellar panel today, which includes 2 chief executives and 1 chief scientific and strategy and technology officer of cutting-edge local life science companies operating in fields in which they and Scotland more generally are global leaders. Both Kevin Bruce of RoslinCT Therapies and Kate Cameron, Cytochroma, are building companies based on unique capabilities to grow human cells and tissues to accelerate the development of regenerative medicines and gene therapies. Both were spin-outs from the University of Edinburgh's Centre for Regenerative Medicine in 2006 and 2017, respectively. That centre was the one founded by the late Ian Wilmot to build on his breakthroughs in developmental biology that enabled Dolly the sheep. This centre, or the CRM for short, was the inaugural building at the BioQuarter, adjacent to the new Royal Infirmary at Little France, of which we're also pleased to welcome Anna Stamp, its programme director, responsible for catalysing the final stages of the build-out of that campus that will transform the BioQuarter into one of the UK and Europe's leading innovation districts. And our final panellist, Douglas Martin, is the founder and CEO of MiAlgae. And here, I was pleased to see that Lord Sainsbury's last slide included green technologies, because that's exactly what MiAlgae is. They've completed the development of a highly scalable, zero-waste solution to recycle co-products from food and drink production to grow omega-3 rich microalgae, returning clean water to the system and saving billions of wild fish in the process to provide a sustainable source of essential high-value feed ingredients to the aquafeed, pet food, farm animal, and human nutrition markets. Both MiAlgae and Cytochroma are relatively young companies that have been financed to date by Equity Gap, one of Scotland's leading angel syndicates, with Scottish Enterprise Match funding, along with support from family offices and grants. Now, Kate and Douglas, both your companies are now poised for substantial growth, and I'd like to start by asking you, what are the challenges you're facing to realise the full potential of your companies here, and how the Scottish and UK governments could and should provide further investment and support? Kate, perhaps you can kick off. What do you need?
Well, the first thing that we did need was lab space, and I think this is a critical point going forward. We needed space to initially develop our products, and we need more space to grow, and then even more space to grow substantially and maintain skilled sector in Scotland. I mean, there's huge opportunities worldwide for scientific growth, and particularly in San Francisco. And I looked at labs out there. I don't want to be based there. I want to be based here. So I think it's important that we can maintain and grow our scientific companies here with including more lab space that's accessible and affordable.
Thank you. Douglas, what's your perspective? What's holding you back?
I think the key bit for us is, besides the lab space to begin with, we built our own because we couldn't physically find any, and it is still very much Heath Robinson-esque, I think. But the thing for us going forward is more cash early and quicker. I think that the key bit is there's a lot of funding out there, there's a lot of ways for us to grow, there's a lot of funds that we line up with, but really being able to access those in a fashion that allows us to grow at the pace we need to grow in order to compete is a significant challenge. It's about speed as well as the volume of cash.
Sorry, yes. Science is very expensive and quite often doesn't reach a revenue generating stage until quite late on relative to other industries. So it's important to fund these companies continually until we can get that break-even stage, and then that's when you see the sort of hockey stick astronomical growth. So keep funding us.
But in terms of the points made by Gordon Brown and David Sainsbury about the lack of joined-upness of the funding of sources in Scotland, is that a problem that on the ground? Is that what you see when you try and raise money?
I think once you figure it out, and I think we share documents with the lists of funders and how you might be able to get to some of that money as much as we can, but it's bureaucracy and it's red tape and it takes time. I sat through 5 different accelerators through the same thing to get to 50 grand's worth of funding, and that took weeks and weeks and weeks out of a year in order to just keep some team working in the lab. It's that joined-upness that says it worked, now fund it, rather than it worked and now we're going to put you through another accelerator with another person that doesn't necessarily know how to train people at this scale is quite something.
Okay, that's good. Kevin, Roslin Technologies, managed to achieve substantial growth. You were founded back more than 16, 17 years ago. Yeah. You've managed to achieve substantial growth despite these challenges. That led to your recent integration with a major US bioscience company, Lycan, with complementary strengths in the same field, offering you accelerated market penetration in the States, while you offer Lycan a parallel accelerated impact in Europe. I hope that many in the audience spotted that they had big news this week, which is that the world's first CRISPR-enabled drug, that's Exocel from the American company Vertex, its global manufacturing site is going to be here, right? Courtesy of these guys. So how did you get to where you are? What are the challenges you had to overcome to make all this happen? And looking forward, what's going to allow you to continue this fantastic growth?
Well, for 16 of those years, we were a relatively small 30, 40, 50 people company. And really, it's in the last 3 years that we've dramatically grown. Now 240 odd people in Edinburgh and 120 in Boston. And really, the thing that stimulated that was building a relationship with a big international investment, a pharma company that was going to invest here in Scotland. And that really, why did they do that? Good scientific innovation, good scientific foundation, and they knew, and the trust that we built, they knew we would be committed to that. Mm-hmm. And so we've been quite successful, really, in the last few years in making the most of that. But as we look forward to what's going to, we're not going to rest on our laurels. What do we need to continue that growth and benefit here? And it needs that joined-up approach to think about the therapies that we're making. These are disruptive therapies that are potentially a cure for people. That are going to be lifelong impacts rather than recurring impacts. Making patients more economically and socially active, giving them that potential, and taking them out of the health system potentially over the course of a lifetime, reducing that burden. So a joined-up approach that not only thinks about how to bring these therapies to patients here, how we're going to pay for them, because they're not one-off traditional pharma drugs. They're quite expensive, so innovation in how we pay for these therapies. And then investing in the manufacturing. So we're still quite modest in our size, although we've grown quite a lot. But how do we invest in the manufacturing and the R&D here to make the most of that and really bolster the jobs and the opportunity that we have?
And that's also, of course, going to require more capital. And is, in terms of the issue of the joined-upness of sources of money in Scotland, is that something that you also see?
I think in terms of sources of money for us, it's really been around how do we drive revenue for the business with more of what we do, more international clients, driving the business side of things for us. But the R&D part, so continuing to be competitive in terms of manufacturing technology, the adoption of digitalization, and all of these things need investment in those because, even as a relatively successful company now, it's modest in terms of what we can afford to really risk in terms of those areas.
Okay, thank you. Now, Anna, you heard from Kate and from Douglas about how badly needed additional space and facilities that are, and obviously you're at right at the beginning of building that. What's the waiting time, and is there anything that the Scottish ecosystem can do in the meanwhile that can help our rising stars build their business from here, and allow overseas companies that want to invest to come over? What can we do to help them?
So, as we've heard, BioQuarter has all the ingredients that's required to be a global destination for health innovation. We have the University of Edinburgh's medical school. We have 2 acute hospitals there, and what we lack is the labs and offices required for the business. We have a solution for that. We're in the process of forming a private-public joint venture, which will be launched in March. But that is not going to answer everything. The private sector will only build if it's commercially viable. And right now, with construction costs the way they are, you add on infrastructure, of which BioQuarter has no infrastructure. You add on the cost of schools and contributions to roads to the developer, they don't equate with the rentals that you will get from these types of buildings, especially laboratories. Offices, there's an abundance of offices. It's labs that's required, labs beside offices. And companies like Roslin, one of our key tenants at BioQuarter, there's only so much that you can put onto rental that you are able or willing to afford to actually pay. So what will stop BioQuarter having a very slow progress is the viability compared to a very accelerated development, is a contribution towards the infrastructure. The problem with infrastructure is it has to go in first. You wouldn't build your house and then 3 years later come along and build your road to your house. The road has to go in first. It's dull, it's boring, no one wants to talk about roads and pipes in the ground, but they are absolutely essential, and without them, you don't have a building. How do you pay for that? How do you pay for that over a 20-year period? How do you pay for that when you have a multi-headed site? If you pass that on to the early tenants, then you're front-loading it, and you're not going to attract the right tenants. And it's a real puzzle. So what is required is support from government to put in that early infrastructure, which will help enable these sites and then accelerate these sites. And there's no reason. We have abundance of land at BioQuarter. We have almost the ability to build 4 million square feet of accommodation, which would make us one of the largest health innovation clusters in the UK. What will stop us doing that within 10 years as opposed to 40 years is the cost of build.
Thank you. Very good. So we talked a bit about funding. We talked about space. What else that we've heard about from other speakers today would you recognise as helpful? And indeed, are there other things in the Scottish system that actually should stop doing in order to sort of make life easier? Anyone got any suggestions?
I think one key thing about the roads is making sure that all the lab space is not just on the outskirts of town. I know it takes up a lot of space, but we need to be connected to the other fantastic centres that are being built, like the Robotarium at Heriot Watt, the Bayes Centre for AI and Technology. These innovations become tenfold when they're combined with each other, and I think we need to be more interconnected. So improving the transport system is really important to make sure that we all talk to each other and have that cross-innovation.
Good point. Kevin, other thoughts?
I mean, we've heard about sector-specific strategies, and I think it's just being mindful that there will be unique challenges within that with high opportunity that needs stratified, specific solutions to address them, like I've described there. And then that focus on collaboration and coordination we've heard about. So in terms of, for us, with cell and gene therapies, it's going to need coordination with the health service, business, all the different parts of government that are joined up around that value chain to get these therapies to patients and build in that manufacturing component that's going to bring more jobs. So I think having that, we have thoughts on that. We have policy ideas, white paper ideas, but we're doing that. It feels a little bit like ourselves and driving it ourselves. So how do we engage with these other components and have these people come to us and ask for what we need and be part of that conversation?
Well, there may be a few potential allies in the audience. Would anyone like to come up and ask us some questions? We have a couple of mics, I believe, for audience questions at the front. Ooh, yep. Okay.
Hello, I'm Linda Wallace. I'm from Edinburgh Napier University. We in the university sector have taken a lot of note of the Scottish Government's innovation strategy recently and a smart specialisation strategy. I couldn't help but notice how high up on Lord Sainsbury's slides Singapore is, and they adopted a smart specialisation strategy decades ago. I think we might be at that stage, so what resonates with what we've heard about the sector focus of today is we've got energy, we've got life sciences, we've got digital, and those also are the kind of themes. We've got 4 themes in this innovation strategy, but those are the themes in the Scottish Government Innovation Strategy. So I think all the talk about collaboration is everyone wants to do it. It's about how to do it. So I noticed that we've got Mark Logan in the front row, and he's going to speak later about ecosystems, I'm sure. And what I wanted to talk about is I really enjoyed the talk earlier from Heriot-Watt University. And I think on another level, when we talk about innovation, what we're talking about is what the universities can do to convene some of these sort of more specialist, focused, niche challenge areas. So underneath those big, high-level, if you like, themes, because they're not sectors, they're themes. We've got also sub-themes or cross-sectoral challenges, and that's where we need to focus. And I'm head of knowledge exchange at Edinburgh Napier, and I've worked in a number of other universities in Scotland. And there's a whole infrastructure in the university sector of people like myself who they work, we call ourselves a research office, we work at the interface between businesses and academia, and generally we are working with individual companies and doing knowledge transfer partnerships. We're doing CPD, so training people who are in work, and we're doing lots of sort of more one-to-one relationships, but we can also universities can play an essential role in convening those kind of, if you like, ecosystems or subparts of an ecosystem around a particular challenge or opportunity. So it's not really a question, it's more, does that answer your point you just made, Kevin, around, remember there's some very niche areas that need a concerted effort. I just wondered if that sparked my thoughts there.
Well, certainly. I mean, having been back in Edinburgh for 25 years and having been largely based at Edinburgh, but over the last 10 years at least begun to see increased collaboration with Heriot-Watt. So, for instance, the Robotarium, is a themed single entity, well housed at Heriot-Watt for good reason, but obviously with significant input from Edinburgh. As an investor, because I'm also an angel investor, I'm involved with one of the angel syndicates, I get to see what's going on in all the universities, and indeed we've invested, this is par equity, we've invested in a number of Napier companies. And I do think there's actually more scope, and maybe as the investment community can also help here in bringing together what they see from the different universities and spin-outs and the tech transfer operations, flagging opportunities, and then perhaps helping join some of them together. So I think that's a good. There is more room for that, and I think it's a point well made. And we can do. We certainly have no excuse for not doing more within the Edinburgh ecosystem, let alone the greater Scottish ecosystem. Any other panelists got any thoughts on that?
Well, one of the things that's going to be key to our growth going forward is adopting digital technologies. We've done a great job of growing so far. We've built our own training academy in the business to employ graduates and bring them through and train them in what we do. But we're not going to be able to scale that in that fashion going forward. We need digital. So we're thinking about graduates of the future coming with not how do we update this paper form, but can you update this app? Do you have some coding experience as well as the science and so on? So we have been engaging with universities on curriculum and also going to present what we do and think about the kind of jobs and careers that are there. I think you're right that it's not just that vertical look at things, but also across these sectors and how we join them together.
Thank you. I think the only other thing to add there is that for us, the fair IP side when dealing with some of the universities and the speed at which you can get some of this IP out through license agreements and everything else, if we can smooth that process and we get something that is more equitable and makes it worthwhile for companies like ours to engage more with universities. We've spent, and I won't name the university, but 2 years negotiating PhD contracts that we were paying for, and we still ended up with a very difficult discussion.
I mean, we've actively avoided taking on students because of IP issues with universities. And it has to be really clear cut because it could be the death of your business. If you lose your IP, you lose your investors, you're nothing. But you also want to encourage the next generation of scientists to be looking at careers that are not just in academia, but in industry as well, and driving that economy. And I think there's a lot we can learn from people all over the world that are looking at tech transfer offices. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. Look at people that are doing it well and adopt those policies.
Yeah. Yes, you had a follow-up? Oh.
So just to talk about, some of the slides earlier did talk a lot about IP spin-outs. The map that showed in Scotland where we have spin-outs, it's an interesting point to note that Abertay, where it was mentioned by Gordon Brown, doesn't have any IP that it generates. It gives it all. It has a completely different model, so that's why there's no spin-outs, because they're IP-based businesses. So they were absolutely absent for the map, and they're absolutely active in that space. So I just wanted to point that out. The other thing is, because it's so easy to see spin-outs, so I'm an innovation researcher myself, part-time, and because it's so easy to see spin-outs from the outside, people are misinterpreting the size of that piece to the overall innovation support piece that we do from universities. So it's really a small part. So I'm going to, if anyone wants to look up a paper on that, you can look at Hughes and Kitson from 2013, and you can see on a bubble diagram, it's quite often used in innovation discussions, and it shows you how small the IP-based knowledge exchange actually is. Much more common is people-based problem-solving activities. Obviously, the education, the power of education, the people that we educate and go out to businesses or export out to businesses. It's really a much more diverse knowledge exchange landscape than spin-outs, IPs. But we do get a little bit distracted. But just to answer your question about what we can learn from others, there's a big debate going on in the sector at the moment about how we manage IP. It's sometimes, if you look into the detail of it, really not that different in Scotland, and the UK have got a general consensus about it, and it's really been overplayed in the media as something that's very negative, but we are actually all paying attention to that debate, and we're definitely, I think the slide's showing, punching above our weight, certainly compared to the rest of the UK in terms of generating spin-outs. So the problem might be somewhere else in the system, rather than how much spin-outs are coming out of the universities.
Okay, thank you. Now, I'm afraid I'm noting that we're running out of time, and there's only one more panel before coffee, and I don't want to hold you up from your coffee. Most of us will be around during the coffee break, so please come and talk to any of us if you want, and with further questions. Thank you, panelists. And now for our second panel discussion, we're going to hear about Scotland's opportunities in digital technology, to be led by the director of our Scottish Future, Eddie Barnes. Thank you very much.